of Common Sense America with Eden Cornell. Yeah.
And good morning, good morning, good morning, my beautiful, sweet country, America. Thank you so much for being here. This is Common Sense America. I am Eden Hill, and today is National Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day. I want to thank all of those who have served our nation's military. Freedom is not free, but thank you to our veterans. Thank you to all of those who are active duty, and thanks be to God today is officially, from what Maria Bartiromo said on Fox Business this morning at 6 a.m., the vaccine mandate will be lifted off our United States military. And maybe, I am saying this, maybe, just maybe, our recruitment numbers will go back up. Maybe, just maybe, our nation's military will have the most powerful integrity it has ever had, because they will not be restricted by an authoritarian president who forces, who puts progressive agendas on our military, who puts progressive agendas on our families in our nation's backyard. You know, we have a lot to talk about today, but everywhere I look on our national media, on the legacy and mainstream or lamestream media is what I like to call it, it's constant COVID headlines. Are they trying to intimidate the American people? Are they trying to, constantly just enforce these scare tactics? They've been doing it for 2 years. Enough is enough. That's why Common Sense America is here, people. We're here to talk about truth. We're here to talk about God, country, freedom, family, faith, our kitchen table topics. What is happening in our nation today? This show is founded on truth. This show is founded on God. This show is founded on country. This show is founded on patriotism, liberty, and justice. And our kitchen table topics today are going to be about the continued COVID lockdowns. Are you kidding me? Really? Also, we're going to be talking to an authoritarian author, author of The Authoritarians, a constitutional law attorney, Jonathan Emord, who I admire greatly, but also I'm excited to say he has an exploratory Senate committee looking to run for United States Senate. We need some good people in the United States Senate because, frankly, we don't have any. And also, second part of the show, Moms for America, bringing over on the phone Julian Jackson, talking about Ben Carson's comments most recently on the Daily Signal. The crisis in America's schools continues. We're going to be talking about the cottage meetings that Moms for America continues to do around the nation. And Julian Jackson is a senior advisor on that. And we're also going to be talking about our nation's veterans. Wait until you hear this story. And so I'm honored to bring over to the show. It is 9:03 a.m. Eastern Time. We're bringing over Jonathan Emord to the show. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Just fine. How are you?
Good. Congratulations are in order. I am so excited to hear your news as you have announced your exploratory Senate committee to not run for United States Senate. I was going to end the show and our segment on that, but I'm just so excited for you because seeing what happened in Georgia last night, we need some true Americans in there.
Yeah, we sure do. Our country's in dire straits. And if we don't act presently, I'm afraid we'll lose it. I was hoping that the midterms would make an enormous difference. And certainly it has made a big difference in the House.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as Biden's course, it is doing nothing to stop it. And that's going to require us to take the Senate. And I'm afraid that we're going to have 2 more years of extreme pain for the American people, inflation out of control, crime running rampant, and our borders undefended, and people pouring through, including terrorists, drug traffickers, fentanyl, to the extent that, I mean, it's hard to believe the amount of fentanyl coming into this country. 110,000 people dying a year on average. That number is going to go up, and the amount of fentanyl is going up. Biden's turned over our immigration policy to terrorist cartels. And they are bringing in MS-13 gangs. They're bringing in 18th Street gangs. They are increasing crime all over. people living in the border areas are just devastated because the crime is so incredible. Many have had to shut down their businesses, and we're seeing this crime growing in all of the cities along the eastern seaboard and throughout the country, even in areas where you would expect there to be relatively little crime. You're finding an uptick in crime.
Yes.
At the same time that we have Soros-backed district attorneys, prosecutors, and Commonwealth's attorneys refusing to prosecute, and sanctuary cities all over the country that are embracing illegal aliens and criminals and protecting them from prosecution as well. So we are in dire straits.
Yeah.
Our country needs help, and we need to bring that rescue package in 2024.
Yeah, I completely agree. You know, this show has a huge female audience. It is working moms. It's working women, women in leadership, women of faith. It is our single parents. It is our grandparents. It's our retirees. It's our military, and it's our veterans. And everything that you just said is affecting our kitchen table. It's affecting our budget. It's affecting our gas tank. It's affecting our kitchen table, where how much food can we actually put out now? Can we actually go to the store? Can we actually buy things for Christmas? No, everybody has to cut back on their budget while the government continue to spend trillions and trillions of dollars. But I want to talk about COVID. I want to talk about the fact that we probably will be bumped off today off of my social channels as I'm carrying live. But it happens every time when I talk about COVID. But I don't care. They can censor me all they want. I go out into the streets and I talk and I talk and I talk, because we've got to talk truth. I'm sick of the censorship, and I'm sick of what has happened with the COVID lockdowns. So your article, Town Hall contributor, townhall.com, you wrote an article just a couple days ago, and I want to read something I highlighted, and then I'll let you take it from there. So your headline, Rogue Virginia ABC sends police to enforce COVID lockdown. Virginia has a famous Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, who I admire greatly, who has made his opposition to arbitrary COVID-19 mandates very clear. But his predecessor, Democrat Governor Ralph Northam, although out of office for 10 months, apparently still calls the shots at the Virginia Alcohol Beverage Control Board. He does so through board members he appointed. Indeed, every one of them, including board chair Everett, board CEO Hill, are rogue agents bent on enforcing Northam's infamous Executive Order 72, even after it was withdrawn in May of 2021. So, a couple things I saw from your article, and I want to ask you. They targeted a veteran business, which really got me upset. They also targeted a Republican who looks like he's running for an elected office in the state. So let's break those two things down first. In regards to, are they using the continued COVID lockdown scheme when in fact China is pulling back, says the New York Post today, when the House Republicans are now saying we're pulling back on the COVID mandates on our military, but yet this is happening in the state of Virginia and they just decided to do search and seizure? Talk to me about that.
So the owner of this establishment, Matt Strickland, is a combat veteran from Afghanistan and Iraq. He put his life on the line for our freedoms and came back to this country. And he decided, when he was confronted with this executive order by Ralph Northam, the former governor, Executive Order number 72, that he would not sacrifice his liberties or those of his customers to satisfy the dictates of the governor, particularly because it was an unlawful and unconstitutional order. The order required every Virginian to stay within their homes from midnight till 5 a.m., prohibiting anyone from leaving their homes during those hours. It also required masking in restaurants, but had all these exceptions for playing musical instruments. If you were eating, of course, you could avoid wearing a mask. So if you were seated and about to eat, you could avoid wearing a mask. You could avoid wearing a mask if it was uncomfortable for you, such that you had difficulty breathing. Of course, every time that anyone wears a mask, it's uncomfortable and causes them difficulty in breathing. But then in addition, he had other bizarre restrictions like you can't feed people or give them alcohol after 10 p.m. But you can give them alcohol and feed them at any hour all the way up to 10 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
You had to limit the number of people in the restaurant to 10. You had to have them 6 feet apart, and they had to have all of their seating 6 feet apart, and so on and on and on. Of course,
Right.
all of this has absolutely nothing to do with the transmission of
Right.
the restaurant was very well ventilated and so on. Anyway, he refused to abide by that. The board then went after him, threatening to pursue action. He refused to comply with the order still. Then the board acted against him. Well, at the time that they acted against him, Northam had actually withdrawn the order. In December of 2020, he imposed the order. In May of 2021, he withdrew the order.
Mm-hmm.
Here we are in December of
Right.
2022, long
Right.
after his order was withdrawn by him, and long after a new governor has come into office who has made very clear that he opposes
Mm-hmm.
his actions.
Mm-hmm.
So they pursued him anyway, and then it ultimately led to this raid last Friday in which some 25 armed police into his restaurant, seized all of the alcohol in the restaurant, which is the most valuable property in the
Right.
restaurant.
Right.
It's essential for its continuing operation because you can't profit in a restaurant business without selling alcohol these days. And so they were running him out of business. And they also imaged all of his hard drives. So they gathered information so they could go after other people, including other distributors to his company, to his business during the time of this lockdown. Now, recognize they have no authority to proceed because
Exactly. Exactly. Where, how? Like, who gave them that authority?
well, they pursued the matter and they went to court and they had a circuit court judge who affirmed their power. I wasn't representing him at the time. I
Mhm.
kind of flatter myself in saying that I think I could have achieved a different result, but
Uh-huh.
nonetheless, that's what happened. And then he hired me as his attorney,
Okay.
and I petitioned the governor. Uh, 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 Last week, I petitioned the governor to
Mhm.
act in light of the fact that the executive order in this case had been withdrawn and that furthermore it was contrary to his own policies. And I asked the attorney general to assist in that and formally petitioning them to do so. I'm glad to say that yesterday, Governor Youngkin, in one of the most dramatic moves thus far, has taken a number of steps which are quite remarkable. He's ordered every state agency to report to the Secretary of Finance by
Okay.
January 15th all fines, interests imposed, and disciplinary actions, including the withdrawal, suspension, or cancellation of the license. That's what happened with Matt Strickland and Gore Meltz. And he's asked the Secretary of Finance to review all of that and recommend corrective actions. And he's made clear that these actions he regards as unlawful and he regards them as abusive. And he wants all the people in the state who have been victimized, like Matt
Mhm.
Strickland has been, to have their licenses restored, and if they're fined or had any penalties that they paid, to have those repaid. And he's going to introduce legislation with his budget on December 15th, just a
Okay.
few days from now.
Right.
We'll ask the General Assembly in Virginia to give him authority to reimpose, to reestablish all those licenses that were withdrawn and to reimburse everybody who is forced to pay fines and so on. This is an extraordinary thing.
Mm-hmm.
I salute the governor. I'm thankful to have had a role in petitioning him to ask him to act, and I'm so very grateful to him for acting. He's a courageous man. This is the
Yes,
right
it
thing to
is.
do, and really it's an essential thing to do, and he's done it, and he will follow it through. So we're going to ask the ABC board now not to wait, but to reinstate Matt's license and to return all the alcohol they seized last Friday and to leave this man alone.
Well, I want to wrap my brain, and the common sense piece to this show is ABC board. ABC board. Who who told them that they were God, that they could just go do this? And my question is that something that we, the American people, sitting at our kitchen tables, are we needing to be aware of all these other IRS agents? Are they going to show up on our doorstep and say, hey, we need to see all your financial records today, otherwise we're taking you to jail? Like, has it come down to that extreme aspect that we, the American people, we are no longer free? Is that correct in stating that, or is that just an assumption because of this? Or is it going to continue to happen in and around our country, especially in more of the northern states? Granted, Youngkin, Virginia, Republican state, and I'm glad he's taking a stand. But what about here in North Carolina? We have an empty suit as a governor. Who's to say he wouldn't pull a stunt like this? Who's to say the new governor or the new senator of Pennsylvania, who I can't even wrap my brain around right now, wouldn't pull a stunt like this? So what are we supposed to do from a common sense standpoint?
Well, Thomas Jefferson said, I am not a friend to a very energetic government. It is always oppressive. And we're seeing that in spades from the administrative state, both
Right.
federal and state. Administrative state is really destroying our freedoms in this country and is doing it one by one, picking off people one by one. It's a shocking reality that 2/3 of all of the laws, actually 3/4 now, of all federal law is not the product of those we elect, but the products of the unelected heads of these bureaucratic agencies. They rule like kings. They have virtually no restrictions on their power. The problem is that you don't have constitutional protection that is fulsome when you go up before an administrative agency. You're guilty until you prove yourself innocent. The presumption of innocence does not exist. In addition to that, they have summary procedures which allow them to avoid any discovery against themselves, but have fulsome discovery against you. They use general warrants, which are unconstitutional under the Constitution, yet have been allowed in the administrative agencies. Founding fathers banned general warrants in the Sixth Amendment to the Constitution because general warrants enable the state without probable cause to compel you to produce all manner of personal records and information, and to compel people to come forward and testify. In the administrative courts, you're not allowed to avoid answering questions. You don't have a Fifth Amendment right to protect yourself against self-incrimination. You really have an extraordinary burden in an administrative court. And in fact, in administrative agencies, the party charging you is also the ultimate judge. So there's no separation of that function. And as a result, there's no justice. I mean, James Madison said that it was the very definition of tyranny when you have the combination of executive or judicial or executive and legislative power. In this instance, you've got an executive agency creating the regulations, as well as enforcing them, as well as judging the enforcement. So there's no justice in that. And then the courts have long deferred to the agencies under doctrines derived in the 1980s from a case called Chevron.
Yeah.
They defer to the agency's judgment as to the law and the facts, so you don't even get judicial review. So this is tyranny that must end. The Supreme Court is on to it. They're moving in the right direction. They've taken a number of steps that are restricting the agencies. But the ultimate solution to this is to adopt a bill that I wrote for Ron Paul, which needs to be reintroduced. And I would, if I were a United States Senator, reintroduce it, called the Legislative Responsibility and Accountability Act. And that would compel agencies to avoid implementing any regulation unless it was passed by Congress, restoring the power of Congress to be the exclusive source of all law, and shutting down these agencies in their massive generation of law without any check. In addition to that, I would take all agency regulations on the books and sunset them, have them disappear within 3 years unless they were adopted by Congress, again, preventing agencies from proceeding. And lastly, I would eliminate the administrative courts and force the agencies to pursue actions in the Article 3 courts, the independent courts of law. That would have a tremendous effect upon forcing the agencies to abide by the same and be on a level playing field with the defendants in justifying their actions. So it would really have a very, very, very beneficial effect, and would restore the authority to make law to the people's elected representatives, which is where it never should have left them, and it has left them for over 70 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this. I remember in the last interview we had talked about the fact that the United States of America is very much a modern day socialistic country, if you will. I mean, do you see us as a modern day Russia, or do you see us more as like a China because of all the lockdowns that China has been doing? Granted, they are taking a step back for a second, but the way things are going within this administration, how many more rights do the American people are we going to lose in the next 2 years as we are watching the Biden administration just undo every aspect of freedom from this nation? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, Biden rules very much like a dictator.
Yes,
And
he does.
he relies on executive orders himself to pursue matters that are inherently legislative. For example, his unilateral decision to eliminate student loans,
Mm-hmm.
that violated both the statutory requirements
Mm-hmm.
and also exceeded his power as president. It's a legislative act that has been held unconstitutional, and I believe it will be upheld ultimately by the Supreme Court. But it's that kind of thing that he does all the time. I mean, he suspended rents virtually indefinitely through action of the Health and Human Services, having no jurisdiction whatsoever over that matter, no statutory basis. He just did it unilaterally. His whole shutdown of border defenses,
Mm-hmm.
unilateral action through Mayorkas to completely eliminate any defense we have against illegal entry and illegal drugs entering this country through the southern border. That whole thing is a violation of the immigration laws and is also unconstitutional. So again, a legislative action. And you can go on and on and on with the president. I mean, he has taken action on, his actions on the Keystone XL pipeline.
Yeah. Yes.
These things are all actions that require congressional action. He's done it unilaterally. So that's an authoritarian. That's a person who wants to rule like a dictator, who has no respect whatsoever for the Constitution's limits on power. And he is a grave threat to our republic.
Mm-hmm.
And this is going to continue. This is how he's going to rule. He can't use Congress now that the House of Representatives is in Republicans' hands. So he'll continue to rule this way with strong cheerleading coming from Schumer and Democrat leadership. They favor this approach. They don't care that the Constitution is violated. They are ends justifying the means, and that's how they operate. They want, and your point about the country becoming like a communist state. Well, many of these elected representatives who are in strong positions of control, given them by the leadership, are self-avowed socialists, and the policies we're seeing this administration advance, and the spending, for example, the massive doubling of the budget from $4.5 trillion now to over $11 trillion, plus some 14 additional trillion in other expenditures that are not a part of formal expenditure by Congress. You've got a massive infusion into the marketplace, as well as this whole green socialism, this whole idea that they're going to redirect the entire economy so that we have no fossil fuels in 10 years after Biden's election. The idea that you're going to eliminate fossil fuels means you're going to destroy the very economic backbone of the nation.
Yes.
Kill the free enterprise economy. That's what the goal is. It's no mistake that that's their intent, because we know full well that AOC, who championed this Green New Deal concept, wanted it as a Trojan horse for socialism, because that's what her chief of staff directly said about it at the time being developed. And Biden bought into it. Biden sold his soul to the socialists before becoming elected.
Well, I mean, he sold his soul to the devil. I mean, flat out. I mean, the Catholic Church doesn't even really recognize him at this point. And, not to interrupt you on that point, but let me ask you this. We're talking about Congress and the new Republican Congress we are headed into for right now, lame duck session. Got it. Democrats have a lot on their block that they want to get through before 118th. So my question to you is, with the dictatorship of Biden, what are the Republicans, the newly elected Republicans, not the ones that have been there for a while, do they even have a chance to push things through?
Well, they do have a chance. And in fact, the power of holding these hearings and to make Biden's corruption, which is so manifest, you've got Biden Inc., which is a influence peddling scheme that he's profited off of enormously by dealing with our own enemies and having them pay him money for access to him. I can say that because the monies that were paid by Communist China, agents of Communist China, under the control of Communist China, as well as oligarchs in the Ukraine, as well as Russian oligarchs. All of that money went into joint accounts held by Biden's son, Hunter, as well as his dad. And that money they used to pay Biden's expenses. Now, that violates a constitutional provision, the Emoluments Clause. The Foreign Emoluments Clause absolutely prohibits any executive officer, vice president or president, he was vice president at the time, do this. And so by doing it, he directly violated the Constitution. Ironically, they tried to argue the Foreign Emoluments Clause as a basis for impeachment of Donald Trump, and they had no evidence. And they ultimately dropped that, despite the fact they brought up other grounds that they didn't have evidence for. But the fact of the matter is, there is manifest, overwhelming, and conclusive evidence that Joe Biden violated the Foreign Emoluments Clause. And then, of course, there's enormous amount of corruption involved here, and these influence peddling operations are direct violations of the law. This will be probed, as well as numerous other actions. The border situation be thoroughly probed and exposed. In addition, I hope that this Congress will introduce legislation that will act against all these things. I know that it's may not pass the Senate, but that's what it's all about. You fight for these things. So they need to champion the legislation, make it clear to the American public, and try to use the American public to overwhelm the Senate with support for these measures and try to get them passed. Now, Biden will veto them.
Right.
What we need is to hold him to account, to show that when it came to providing protection for the borders, he directly vetoed the measures to do that. Or when it comes to protecting our kids in school from transitioning and the whole horrific, absolutely barbaric, and clear child abuse that is associated with transitioning. When measures are introduced to stop that, if Biden's on record as vetoing those things, of course, this is how you make him look to the American people exactly what he is. We want a mirror shown to the American people that reflects the true Biden, rather than the propagandistic view that they're trying to propound from the White House. They're doing a terrible job of it because Biden himself is a blithering buffoon.
Yes. Yeah, and half the time, I really don't even think he knows where he is. Half the time, I don't think he has. It's even hard to understand what he is saying. And the lamestream media, if that was Trump, they would be all over him like white on rice. You and I both know how bad that would be. But, oh no, he gets a pass. He gets a pass. He gets a pass.
So he has diminished capacity, but not so diminished that he doesn't know fundamentally that he's removed the United States from its Republican foundations and put them, and I mean that as a republic, it from our foundations and has put it on a track to achieve dictatorship and socialism. He's acting the part of the dictator. He's disrespecting the Constitution. He does it with such frequency, it's impossible for him not to know that he is heading the nation in a socialist direction. He has sold his soul to the socialists. So yes, he's mentally impaired. Yes, he shouldn't be president of the United States. He never should have been. But the point of the fact is he is acting as president, and we should be terrified. And most people are, I think, coming to the realization that they cannot have another 4 years of Joe Biden.
Well, I hope that most people heads are out of the sand and they are aware of a lot of this. I think some heads are still in the sand. They don't even want to talk about it. And then there are others who are saying, oh, wow, look at my taxes. Look how bad my taxes are. Their heads are finally out of the sand. So hopefully enough American people will wake up, have the common sense to say, no, we are not voting for Biden come 2024. On that note, Jonathan Emord, townhall.com contributor, constitutional law attorney, one of my favorite authors of The Authoritarians. Thank you so much. I'm excited for your exploratory committee. I will do anything I can to support you. Please come back. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. And for all of those who are tuning in, this is Common Sense America, and I am Eden Hill, and I